Welcome to Leadership Development News, Profiles and Practices of Top Performers. I'm Dr. Roy Nedler. Dr. Kathy Greenberg, my esteemed host. We are going on 20 years in 2026. Kathy is joining us today from Italy, so I'm so glad she made it. And we're going to be talking today with Mark Robert Waldman. He has created NeuroCoaching. I've been training with him over the years. Today, we're going to tap his brain, and he's going to tell us about brain networks, myths, emotional transformation. And so we're really glad to have Mark. He's on top of all the neuroscience literature and research. So we'll see kind of what's new and what we should put into use. And so let me just kind of start us off, and then I'll turn it back over, Kat, to you. So we are in the midst of these four challenges. We have more emotional distress these days, anxiety, uncertainty. Gallup tells us 75% of us need more support. That's you, our listeners. That's all of us. And also on the other side of it, we have less emotional self-awareness. So here's all these emotions, and we're not so good with it. Some of the research says we think we're in about the 90th percentile. Tara York's got some research that says only about 15% of us are self-aware. So you got a lot of stress, but we don't know what to do with it. And then we're on autopilot almost all the time. So I like to say, if you stay on autopilot, you stay average. And most of us are on autopilot as much as 95% of the time. And so a lot of coaching and a lot of things that we're going to talk about, mindfulness, is slow thinking, the term from Daniel Kahneman. And so in this slow thinking, and I know I've learned from Mark, there's a lot of things you can do that don't take a lot of time. You know, Kathy and I have this book, Emotional Brilliance, and we have this tool. What do you do with emotions? Well, you have to name it. And that stands for, it's an acronym. You have to notice it and give it a name. You have to accept it. Some of the questions we have from Mark are about accepting unwanted emotions, but you have to manage it. And a lot of his tools and what Kathy and I bring are tools to manage. What are you managing? You're managing your thoughts, but you're also managing your emotions. And then are you expressing it? Maybe just to yourself. Or have you figured out the right person to express it so you can feel heard? And so with that, one of our management tools that we like to promote is the emotional audit. We like to say that in 15 seconds, you can have more emotional intelligence. How? These 5 questions. It's a mindfulness inventory. So you take a moment and you say, what am I thinking? Thinking about your thinking. That's called metacognition. Is there a pattern there? What am I feeling now? That's called meta-awareness. Is there a pattern there? And then with that, what do I trying to accomplish? What do I want now? That's called meta-attention. And then as a coach, what we really need to be aware of is, how am I getting in my own way now? Let's bring awareness to that. That's meta-awareness and meta-pattern. Is there a pattern there? Or how am I getting in my own way? And with all that information, all that mindfulness inventory, the key question is, and Mark can help us on this, what do I need to do now to be my best? And that's where some of these tools, strategies come in, a combination of meta-awareness, meta-attention, metacognition. Mark's going to help us in regards to some of the NeuroCoaching. What do I need to do now to be my best? So, Kat, welcome. We want to make sure you say a couple words from Italy. Thanks for joining, and then we'll bring Mark in.
Yeah, I'm very excited to be here. I am in Rome. I have had a lovely time here. I'm working on some things that we'll talk about in the future, and very, very excited to have Mark back on the show, learn more about what he's been diving into. And it sounds like you're becoming pretty astute there on these meta qualities that we need as human beings to be more self-aware. And I'll tell you, The one thing I love about the Italians
Yeah.
is they have civility. You walk into a restaurant, buongiorno, buonasera. You walk into a store, buongiorno, buonasera. Everybody welcomes you. And civility to me
Yeah.
is the first step in honoring our self-awareness. It gives you the absolute consciousness of at least being polite, recognizing another human
Yeah.
being in relationship to someone other than yourself.
Yeah.
And I truly enjoy that when I'm here. And I
Ah,
love those people for that. So I
great.
don't know if they've been studying with Mark, but they're all doing very well, I have to say.
Well, that sense of connection, and Mark's smiling here if you're seeing this. All right, so let me say a word about Mark, and then we're going to jump into it. So Mark Waldman is a leading researcher in the new field, and I'm not sure how new it is these days, but of network neuroscience. He certainly is a leading voice. He's authored 14 books. That's more than you and I, Kathy. So he's up there. Words Can Change Your Brain is a great one. How God Changes Your Brain. It was selected by Oprah as a must read. He's been on the faculty of what's called the Holmes Institute. He created the first NeuroLeadership program at Loyola Marymount. And along with Andy Newberg, and I think Kathy, I think you know Andy Newberg. Uh,
Absolutely.
Mark is considered one of the world leading experts on how spiritual practices and mindful speaking can enhance brain functioning. And it's been featured, his research has been featured in Time, Newsweek, Washington Post, New York Times, Forbes, PBS, National Public Radio. He has twice a month these trainings that I've been a part of where he has a series of students who are learning from him and is constantly bringing in new research, evidence-based, what I really appreciate about Mark. And then the other part, Pat, you and I work with executives and leaders all the time. Mark's strategies and tools you can do quickly because nobody has time. So Mark, welcome.
Oh, I'm so delighted to be here.
And you've got that special background, which I love. And so
My brain just expands into the meta universe without any kind of limitations, but I'm just being modest.
yes. Well, we got these neurons and axons going, so we're going to tap into that. And so we always like to kind of start. You've been doing this for quite a while. What's been some of your kind of key influences, over the years to progress to where you are around the neurocoaching?
Well, I think that in some ways, I'd have to go all the way back to about 1971, 72, when I was in college and pretty much had virtually no awareness of much of anything. Even the few psychedelic trips that I had taken didn't really make me aware of the altered state things would happen. I'd be kind of fascinated with it. But when I started reading the Carlos Castaneda books, and Castaneda went out and found this mythical character named Don Juan, a Yaqui Indian shaman, the first two books were filled with all kinds of psychedelic experiences that Don Juan was forcing down his throat and everything else, and blowing his mind and wrestling with different entities and the that may or may not exist. But the third book, Journey to Ixtlan, is what blew me away. And in that book, Castaneda asked a very important question. He said, if you weren't really teaching me the important lessons of life, why were you shoving all these psychedelics down my throat? And he said, basically, because you were too stubborn.
Oh.
So the chapters that still stand out in my mind, the first one was erasing personal history. And so I was, 22, 23 at the time, and I didn't like my history. I didn't know what value it had. And the psychoanalysts that I saw later on didn't help either, because they just helped me create all kinds of false personal histories that weren't useful either. But to erase my personal history was the first notion that it could bring me fully into the present moment. And you had mentioned, you were talking about different levels of meta-awareness earlier. And one of the most important ones, as far as the latest breaking news in contemporary neuroscience, is that two forms of meta-awareness are essential and maybe are the only two keys for maintaining optimal neurological and psychological health. And one of them is simply being aware of how your mind wanders. So our thinking is going on about 20 times faster than we can ever capture or put into words. And so our thinking process, most of us don't know this, are nonverbal. They don't really have words to them. They're spinning around, and other parts of our brain have to figure out, how do I capture that impression, that feeling, that urge, that desire, and find some kind of word that I can share with you that might give you a sense of what's really going on inside of me. So if you sit back and learn how to watch all of your thoughts and feelings, you'll see that they're little bits and pieces and partial pieces of information flowing so fast you can't put them into words. So the wonderful thing about this form of meta-awareness, awareness of how your mind wanders, is if I was to put you in a brain scan machine, you would see that your mind is wandering all over the place. And so this big default imagination network sitting on the top of your head here is profoundly active. And if it gets too busy, that's actually the neurological definition of anxiety or depression or rumination or worry or fears or doubts. Well, just watching all of those, maybe this, maybe that, what if, I could do this, I shouldn't do that, blah, 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 going on so fast up there. Just watching it, instead of it being this busy, slows it down.
Yeah.
So the more you are aware of the noise that's going on inside of you, the less noise there is.
You know, you're saying something that's so powerful, Mark. I want to share an experience with you and maybe get your feedback on the experience. So about a year or so ago, 2 years ago this October, my husband and I went to a special clinic in Chicago. We had 5 days of ketamine, and then we each had stellate ganglion blocks. Now, he did it because what we were provided with by some donors was something called the Spec Ops cocktail. And Matthew, my husband, had been with Navy Special Warfare for 25 years. So they wanted to see how we would respond as a couple. And what was fascinating, Mark, was they put us in 2 beautiful lounge chairs. They were leather, and very reclining, very comfortable. They had us hooked up to machines, obviously. And then when
What kind of machines, if I may ask?
For brain scans and pulse, EEGs, EKGs.
Okay.
And they slowly introduced both of us to the ketamine concurrently and had us hold hands. And what was fascinating was when we came out of our ketamine treatment, which was equal to what you called earlier, kind of an LSD trip, we both shared one experience. So Matt saw what I saw what Matt saw. And it was phenomenal that we could come out of that experience together and say, did you see that? Were you there? Were you at that party? Oh, did you see that person? And it was like the most engaging awareness that I'd ever experienced. And let me just end with this before we go to a break. When I came out of my ketamine treatment for the 3rd or 4th time, I realized, Mark, that I had heard joy for the first time in 20 years. When I heard the nurses giggling and laughing in the hallway, I realized that I was happy hearing that joy. And prior to having that ketamine treatment, and prior to recognizing that level of self-awareness, I had heard people giggle and laugh and found it extremely annoying. And so I thought to myself, what a beautiful experience to share someone else's beautiful dream and then to experience true joy. It was fascinating and phenomenal. So I would love to hear some of your take on that, Mark, in terms of experiences that you have had as you were describing them.
What you're describing actually sounds like MDMA or ecstasy trips that we used to take back in the 1990s, and I was actually an MDMA therapist before it went illegal. Oh, wow. And although I haven't taken ketamine, I'm interested in it because I think that lower doses below the level of hallucination may be somewhat the same. So as far as I have looked at in terms of the brain scan research, MDMA, ketamine, even holding hands, even by just being fully present. So the other form of meta-awareness is just being aware of the present moment, the sounds, the sensations, if you're holding hands. And so all of these types of psychedelics or neuropsychedelics do the same thing. When you look at the brain scan, the busyness, all that inner chatter is interrupted. You can't think the way you normally think. Mm-hmm. And so what I would imagine happened to you is that normally you hear these people laughing or talking or whatever else, and it's like, go away because you're busy thinking about all of this over here. And that's distracting you. If your thoughts get turned off or tuned way, way down, then you're having the actual experience in the present moment of the quality of that laughter or giggling or sadness if the person is going through grief. And so the more you have these brief moments of being in the present moment, the experience that's actually going on with the other person and between the two of you is heightened. So it becomes almost an ecstatic experience. It's like, oh, wow, I'm so fully present. All of that noise, all of those thoughts and feelings and wonderings and blah, 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 it's just turned off. And you and I are here. And that would be my neurological definition of love and psychological health.
Well, that is absolutely breathtaking. And we're going to take a quick break so we can all take a quick breath. So don't go away. We'll be right back with our guest, and we'll talk more about being present and being the best version of you. Come right back. You're listening to Leadership Development News.
Welcome back to Leadership Development News. We're talking with Mark Robert Waldman. You can go to his website, markrobertwaldman.com. He has a series of ebooks. One of them that I would suggest is a nice little overview of the things that we're going to talk about today. Neuroharmony, 8 strategies to balance your brain networks. And so now, as we're talking about brain networks, I know, Mark, I think you really have taken a lot of this research and put it into a way that people can understand it. And so maybe share a little bit about the brain networks that you are promoting.
Sure. So about 5 or 6 years ago, there was a tremendous change in the neuroscience world. So instead of talking about parts like the amygdala or prefrontal lobe, attention began to fall on these regions of the brain that communicated with each other, and that each region kind of had its own special function. And so this is a little drawing that I made to represent the 5 key networks, and most people are really focusing on just 3 of them. This big orange area on top, if you were to put your hand kind of up like here, This is your default network, but I prefer the term imagination network because it's what's constantly dreaming up all the possible things that you could do or shouldn't do or might do. It's trying to predict the future, and as far as your brain is concerned, the future is basically just the next 10 or 15 or 20 seconds that will lead that huge, hedonistic, pleasure-oriented mass up there towards more pleasure, more enjoyment. So it dreams up all of these possible imagination things that you could do. Then there's a deeper area, the blue area on here, which you'd have to kind of go in this way and down this way. And that's referred to as your salience network. This is the part of your brain that decides what is valuable to pay attention to. It's also your social brain. It's also the last part of your brain to fully develop. It doesn't even come online until you're about 28, 29, 30 years old. And some of the people I've met, maybe 60 or 70 or 80 years old. And that salience network is what creates a balance between just the right amount of imagination and creativity that you need to figure out what to do in the next moment, because every moment, every present moment is unique. It's never happened before in the past. And then this little front area here, so if you were to put your fingers like right above your two eyeballs here, that little tiny area is your central executive network. This is the part of your brain that does things. So for me to speak, I am doing the movements of my mouth. I'm pulling out words that are stored all over the place and trying to organize them into some short pattern that you can understand. But after about 10 words, or 10 seconds even, you use up all the neurochemicals to stay highly focused. So, this is your attention center as well. And basically, it has to go into a resting state, and then your imagination kicks in, and your mind's supposed to go off and wander for another 5 or 10 seconds, which is good because if I stop talking at that point, your mind wandering process is going on to find value in the words that I said. What's interesting is that you might be finding a different value in what I'm saying. So like in my classes, for example, I might lecture as I've done right now for 5 minutes, whatever else. And then I would pull out a bowl and I would ring it. I would ask people to close their eyes. I would ask them to mindfully yawn and stretch 2 or 3 times, because yawning is also the fastest way to slow down all that excessive anxiety, imagination, noise in the brain. And I would guide a person into brief moments of relaxed, mindful awareness. And if you do another yawn and stretch, you might begin to notice that the slower you move, the more your thinking slows down, and you can't move slow enough. And it helps to bring you more and more into the present moment. And in that present moment state, you become more aware of your own body, your own sense of what's going on. And when I ask my students then, what have you found to be the most valuable in anything I've just said? And we can all kind of do it together. Everyone close their eyes and hopefully not listen to the gardeners and dogs barking out in the background there. Close your eyes, yawn, stretch, and relax, and ask your intuition, because this is also your salience network. What is the most interesting, useful, or valuable thing that any of us have said so far? And your intuition is part imagination and a part value center. What did you find to be the most interesting and valuable? And see if you can grab onto a little piece of insight that kind of gives you, yeah, that was the most interesting to me. Mm-hmm. I have my students write it down, and if you had a little interesting insight, I recommend that you write it down as well. And then, let's say there were 30 people in my class. 20 of them have come up with a different insight than everybody else.
Right.
And half of those insights had nothing to do with what I said.
Yeah.
And this is the beautiful thing about these networks. If you keep exercising, shifting back and forth between consciously watching how my imagination and mind wanders, pausing and thinking, what is the most valuable thing I might do or say next? That central executive network. That shifting back and forth slows everything down, helps us to be more connected with what's going on in the present moment. You might notice that even as I talk about this, I find myself slowing down in my speech. Mm-hmm. You might be becoming even more relaxed listening to the tone of my voice. And then we're floating into what would be called neural resonance. So if you and me and Kathy were in brain scan machines, and we're both deeply relaxed and aware of the present moment and letting each other's words flow through each other, or in Kathy's state, to actually hold each other's hands, you see the same networks lighting up in the same way, being activated at the same time. And that's what intimacy is. That's what it is to feel fully connected with ourselves. And in that state, there really isn't even a you or a me or an us. There's the experience of this togetherness. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So that's the shared neural harmony, and if people wanted to, they can kind of see more about that. One of the things both Kathy and I, we're in a coaching school, and I've been at the College of Executive Coaching now for 25 years, training people to be certified coaches. So much on the prefrontal cortex. And I always am having them take a break, close their eyes, ask their intuition, exactly like you're saying, to integrate that. And we do what I call an IQ break, where the I stands for integration and questions. And so they close their eyes because there's just too much coming at them. And then, like you're saying, it's amazing what stands out for everybody. It's hard, it's hard to get many of them the same thing. And so you could see how diverse our brains are.
Well, the thing that I do in my classroom as well is that I don't allow my students to take notes, even when I'm doing my online courses and teaching coaches and individuals and personal development, whatever else. You cannot take notes. Half the time I'm going to have you keep your eyes closed so you stay in this state of relaxed mindful awareness. Yeah. Because if you're taking notes, you're doing what your first grade teacher told you to do. Pay attention to me. I'm going to say A, B, C, D. You need to repeat A, B, C, D. There's nothing original in that. There's nothing creative in that. And that imagination center is the key to happiness, getting what we want, because it's constantly looking for a new way to be more fully alive and engaged in this present moment, having fun. Basically, our brain is built to have fun.
You just said something very interesting, and really, I'm sure this has come to your mind as well. When we look at organizations, and we look at most people in organizations, we see from their behavioral responses to almost anything that our brain is wired for hard times. It's a survival brain, and people are always going to a scenario that might include threat. So,
I'd like to jump in and challenge that urban myth.
Okay.
This is one of the mistakes that was made, and I probably made it as well, as many neuroscientists did. Prior to 1993, people like Joseph Ledoux were always talking about the amygdala. But he was studying the amygdala in terms of what happens when that mouse was being threatened. But that's only 1/3 of the amygdala. The other 2/3 of the amygdala, one part is just engaged with working with that salience network to find out what's important and valuable to pay attention to. And the other third is focused entirely on pleasure. So our brains are not survival oriented. They are pleasure oriented. what can bring me the most amount of reward, the most amount of satisfaction, the most amount of joy, serenity, connectedness in this present moment with you. Because if I'm alone and I'm isolated, that salience network, your social brain, is actually going to wither. And the beautiful thing about bursting that urban myth is that it also tells us that many of the things that we think are traumatic aren't anymore. You may have had a traumatic experience, but for 50 to 75% of all people, they recover that emotional resilience, okay? And you can help somebody build emotional resilience using any of these strategies, so that most people do not have the anxiety, stress, or trauma that unfortunately a lot of popular psychology individuals have been promoting over the past 5 years. Anxiety levels have not increased. If you actually look at all of the statistics from all the different countries, it's kind of remained the same, and it's rather small. So most people are in a state of what I would call post-traumatic growth. Here we've had a surprising experience, a disturbing experience, an unsatisfying experience. And if we can sit back and encourage that imagination to rearrange everything in a brand new way, that new perspective is what undermines even serious dimensions of PTSD. So we use our imagination. We keep pulling ourselves back into these meta-awareness states that Relly was talking about early. Then we need to do, there's one other aspect of meta-awareness that's left out of even most mindfulness training, which is being aware of how you and I are interacting in this present moment. So we have to share the experience that we have, which is only a few seconds long before it changes. I have to speak briefly, staying really connected to you with my eyes, and then I have to pause and listen really deeply to the next 10 or 20 words or few seconds of what has floated into your consciousness that you've deliberately chosen feels to be the most valuable thing for you and I to share together. That's intimacy.
Right. What I love about that, Mark, we talked about the kind of the slow thinking. You've been showing one of your strategies is for people to slow down. I've used this with executives who have a tendency to talk too fast. Is the hands, and can you say this in 10 or 20 words? And it just slows them down to pick just the right word. So when I'm presenting, I'll speak slower and do that. And so some of these are just so invaluable that they can do quickly and have as a useful tool.
And I even have to do this. Otherwise, I'll tend to ramble on far more than your brain can absorb.
I've seen that, so I would agree. But let's just finish with your dimes, and I want to, because I pulled this back up again for our listeners. Practical Neural Wisdom, Achieving Neural Harmony. You go to Mark's website, you'll get this. He's got the model, and you talked about the imagination. You talked about the salience. I want you to talk maybe more about the salience. And you talked about the D, which is the doing executive, but you have two more on there, and it's the emotional and motivational. So maybe say something about that.
So one of the reasons I turned to neuroscience a good 25 years ago is that there were like 500 or 700 schools of psychology and like 100 different perspectives. If I go to this person, they're going to say, this is what my problem is, and this is what my solution should be, and this is what their definition of health is. I'd go nuts and I'd become bankrupt if I tried to find the one that matched me. So I basically said, well, I guess I'm going to have to trust my intuition anyway. So what neuroscience does, it helps to bring everything down to what feels the most essential in the present moment. So one of the things that neuroscience blew me away with, and this would be the work of Jack Panksepp, is that we actually live in the present moment emotionally. And these emotions are different from the feelings that we are consciously imagining. So I don't necessarily feel irritated or frustrated. In the present moment, I might have hit a barrier. Something didn't go the way I had hoped or expected it to go. In the present moment, emotionality, like right now, what am I emotionally experiencing? Right now, I'm feeling excitement. There's this underlying energy of,
Right.
I love this conversation. So those emotional centers are way back in the lower part of the brain. They're all pre-conscious. And then again, that salience network decides how important is it to pay attention to the emotion of sadness or joy or genuine fear, the genuine threat going on in the world. And what happens next is that yellow area in this drawing, the motivation network, becomes stimulated. And so what's going on again right before we are conscious is that, okay, I've had this experience. What is it that I really want to do next? It's just like your puppies, your dogs, your cats, young children. The moment you wake up, your eyes open up, your brain is designed to look around and look for something that's new, different, fun, potentially rewarding. And that motivation center releases all of this dopamine, which is your motivation drug. And where does that dopamine go? Right up to your imagination center. So it turns on all the different ways that you might be able to put that motivation into action. Your doing central executive network. All the time, these networks are rapidly shifting back and forth faster than we can never be aware of. So emotional experience in the present moment. Ooh, I feel the breeze on my face. Oh, I want more of it. I'm going to go step outside. I'm going to go walk down that path. I'm going to dip my toes into that stream. Ooh, that's incredibly pleasurable. Ouch, it's too cold. I'm going to pull my foot back. There's motivation going on in each one of these 5 or 10 seconds. What does this brain want to do next to get more and more satisfaction, pleasure, enjoyment in the world? And because that salience network keeps everything balanced is our social brain, we really need to do this with each other. We need to share our experiences in a few words, the best words we can find to capture that, and give the other person time to absorb it. So Kathy's experience on ketamine slowed everything down. Oh, I can barely speak one word, let alone 10. Yeah. But you're present. You're fully present with that other person. And we've just never been taught how to pay attention to that remarkable present moment experience and to figure out some way to share it. That's where metaphors become more valuable than abstract words. My current research is in neurocognitive poetics. If we don't speak with a little bit of melody and rhythm, as if we were composing a poem out loud, a phrase, pause, you absorb it. Another phrase, pause. What does my intuition want to create for that next phrase? And we construct a poetic dialogue between you and I. Well, literally, as far as your brain is concerned, it's incredibly erotic.
Well, that was a fascinating, we're absolutely enthralled. I'm sure everyone is just sitting on the edge of their seat. We're going to take a very quick break. We'll be right back to talk more about your brain and possibly more ecstasy. Don't go away. We'll be right back. You're listening
to Leadership Development News.
Welcome to Leadership Development News, profiles and practices of top performers. You know, our show now is on YouTube, and the audio is on Apple and Spotify. So go on there and follow us so that you can get more of the shows. And so, Mark, this idea of mindfulness, you and I have talked about this before. I've been doing it since I got out of college. I've probably in my life have missed 10 days. And the reason that I do it, it works so well. You know, I got trained in transcendental meditation. I now bring that to a lot of the people that I coach with some of the apps like Take a Break, Headspace. And so some of the research, and I want to get your take on that, is how much is enough? Because no one has time. We've talked about that. How much is enough? And so part of that is Amisha Jha in her book Peak Mind tried to get what was the dose that could be effective for people. But her dependent variable was really about attention. What can allow you to improve your attention? And it was 12 minutes. And so for me, even if I do it for 5 minutes, let's say before this show, I don't have that much time, any minutes that I can do it is kind of filling my tank and allows me to be better in the next moment. So what's your thought? And I know you have a different thing that you promote, and I'd love to hear what you said about Richie Davidson too, who is kind of one of the leaders, you know, in this research.
When research on mindfulness and different meditation practices began, 25 years ago, we all selected advanced meditators who had a practice of 45 to 50 minutes a day. And that was what we were using as a constant. And your control group might have been a novice meditator who'd only been doing it for maybe a few months and didn't have that ability. And you would see a very different brain pattern between the advanced meditator and the novice who had just started doing meditation. Or you'd see a huge difference between what happens in the brain after 40 minutes of intense meditation versus 2 minutes of meditation. But the problem is that nobody really understood what those brain changes meant. So there was an assumption that Richie Davidson, there were 3 major neuroscience teams exploring mindfulness and meditation. Davidson's team, Andy Newberg's team that I'm part of, and one other team. And Davidson was convinced that you really had to meditate twice a day for 20 minutes in order to get these long-term alterations in your brain. But again, nobody has been able to figure out whether those alterations in the brain are beneficial or not. What has happened slowly, again, over the 20 years, like Andy and I would do a brain scan study of people doing Satanama for 11 minutes. You would see exactly the same type of neurological changes that took place in the person who was doing 20 minutes and the person who was doing 40 minutes. And then another research team did 3-minute meditations. And again, in that present moment, you would see exactly the same type of neurological fingerprint that's associated with these meditative states and which are now associated with optimal psychological health. And the part of your brain that gets stimulated, even if you are doing 10 seconds of meditation or a mindful yawn, is that blue area in this drawing, your salience network. So that all of these forms of self-reflective, contemplative meditation stimulates the one part of your brain that creates the optimal balance between these other networks in the brain. So we like to view meditation the same way that people now view exercise. If you do 1 minute of aerobics,
Right.
Once, 3 times an hour, 3 minutes, and you do that for 5 times throughout the day, that's 15 minutes of aerobic exercise, and it turns out to be actually equal to almost a 30 or 40-minute aerobic exercise. So Andrew Davidson has come to agree with that as well. So he has a wonderful app, and you choose. You can do a 5-minute meditation. You can do a 1-minute meditation. So our advice is kind of like Henry Miller, who the author, wrote a book, an essay called "Paint as You Like and Die Happy." My advice is meditate as you like and live happy. So do as much meditation in whatever way you want, in the most pleasurable way possible. If you don't like sa, ta, na, ma, you can do I am happy, I am happy. It doesn't matter. There is no, quote, sacred right way to meditate or pray or chant. They all have similar effects on the brain. So I like to recommend to my students and people we work with and in our business training, set a mindfulness clock to ring 2 or 3 times an hour. And when you hear that bell, even if you're in the middle of our conversation right now, just stop, close your eyes, and do one mindful yawn, or one super slow stretch, or focus on a deep inner value. This is Herb Benson's research, that if you pick a value word, it could be peace, it could be whatever you need for the next hour, focus, relaxation, and just silently repeat that or focus on that. For 60 seconds, you actually turn on 1,200 stress-reducing genes and 1,000 immune-enhancing genes. So to me, the research is overwhelming to do little tiny brief moments, particularly when you are working, when you're under the most amount of stress. So every 10 or 15 minutes, a 60-second break will pretty much rebalance all those networks, and you'll be able to throw yourself into work and increase your productivity and your happiness and your satisfaction.
You know, as you're speaking, and I'm sure all of our audience that's listening is taking this in, is drinking it in. And one of the things that continues to fascinate me, Mark, is the fact that when we talk about these things, we are really talking about whole human beings. I know that there are many human beings, like my husband, for example, who has to approach these things in a different way, but still practice many of the things that you are describing, because they have a parasympathetic nervous system deficiency. They have overused that precious gold of our parasympathetic nervous system to the point where it's very difficult for them to practice these kinds of mindfulness tasks. And so I just want to remind our audience that these things are mind-changing, they are life-changing, they are heart-changing, they are future-changing, they are journey-changing. And we have to always recognize that we need to meet people as coaches where they are and not expect them to be at a place and time that we may have evolved to. And so I just want to make sure that as we're listening to you so blissfully, Mark, that our audience remembers you are a gift, and what you're bringing to others is a gift. But it does take exceptional work and concentration. And I just want everybody to understand that, as simple as it may be, not everybody that we are in relationship with in the workplace or in our families or in our communities are whole, happy human beings. They're trying to get there. And I just want everybody to be mindful about that so that they don't look down or they don't lose patience with someone who is not as well aware and self-aware as maybe the three of us are, and many of our audience members. It does take some work.
And so if you can simply interrupt all of your thinking processes, whether you love it or hate it, just for 5 or 10 seconds, that will give you the space to light up that salience network. And that's where you use your intuition to decide what might be the best thing I might do next. And in that situation, take anybody's advice that feels,
Yep.
that feels right and valuable to you, and use that. Throw away anything I've said that you don't like. Don't listen to the master. Intuitively, we all have that little tiny, wonderful blue salience network, and we just need to learn how that we have that inner wisdom to turn to. And that inner wisdom is more valuable than anything anyone else can ever tell you or anything you'll find in any book.
Oh, beautiful. Absolutely.
So just to follow up, Mark, on some of the tools that you're saying, we talked about in the beginning, the emotional audit, which is that inventory. And I think the last question, after you go, what do I think? What do I feel? What do I want? How am I getting in my way? The salience network, what do I need to do now to be my best? You pay attention, close your eyes, and notice what happens. So that's a tool. Mark, the yawning, I've passed on so many times as a thermoregulator, and to do 4 yawns and stretch, mouth wide open. And what I love about it, doesn't happen for everybody, is temporarily I don't have thoughts. So it's like pressing restart on your computer temporarily for a second or two. When does that ever happen? And then all of a sudden everything back opens up again. So that's another great tool. And then the other tool that you have that's really good is around the inner values. So we all know, you close your eyes, you breathe in relaxation, you breathe out tension. Well, and you taught me, how do you breathe into positive? And it's a readiness ritual. How do you breathe in compassion? How do you breathe out empathy? All these you can do in moments.
Is there a question in there?
Well, now you can follow up. I'm giving you back. I'm giving you back that.
Well, I thought what I might do, because I thought you were going to ask me what might be my final piece of advice, or what might be a key thing to add to it. I thought I'd try to practice what I've been preaching, which means I'm going to have to suspend all of my beliefs that I've built up over the past 25 years, see if I can do exactly what you said, Rowley, come into the present moment, and not to judge or look for what I think is the best thing to say or the right thing to say. But if I can just stay in this unusual state, because the present moment, there's no words for being in the present moment. It is a constantly changing experience, one that I've never been able to put into words, even with somebody else who's in the present moment. So if I'm in this state and I say, all right, intuition, what little piece would I like to add that would be even brand new for me to follow? The first words that pop into life is, don't take life seriously. Take life playfully. Now, our intuition isn't always correct, so I'll then sit with it for another few seconds, and I go, ooh, yeah, being playful. I have forgotten how to do that for the last 2 or 3 days, so that's what I'm going to spend the rest of this week doing. I'm just going to float into that playful scenario and enjoy each and every person that I meet in a way that is unexpected.
It's beautiful. So
Absolutely.
I'll let you have the last words, but I think appreciation not only for you, Mark, but also, as you said, that I'm thinking of you, Kat. You and I can be very playful together. I think it's one of your key characteristics that I love. And then Mark, really, thanks so much. I want to plug again them going to your website, Mark Robert Waldman,
Bravo.
and to be able to get Neuroharmony 8 Strategies for Balancing Your Brain. A lot of what Mark said, you can have your own copy. And Kat, we'll turn it back over to you to bring us home.
Well, this has been such a fabulous experience today, and it always is with you, Relly. And Mark, you've added such beauty to our lives today, and I can't wait to re-listen to this show when I can experience you fully. I want to thank our audience for keeping us number one in our 20th year and celebrating with us all year long. And please tune in to Tune Up Your Leadership every week on Leadership Development News. Come back next week. We can't wait to see you.